أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالفي برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته، أو تبعد من أدنيته، أو تشرد من آويته، أو تسلم إلى الملاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة، وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب. إنك تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه، قليل مكثوه، يسير بقاؤه، قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه، ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك. وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي، فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين؟ يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها ضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته. أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآمنين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجر زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رباه؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتترك فيها؟ هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك، ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما،
وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما: أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته، كتمته أو أعلنته، أخفيته أو أظهرته، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيته وبفضلك سترته، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلته أو إحسان فضلته أو بر نشرته أو رزق بسطته أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة وبخدمتك موصولة، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قو على خدمتك جوارحي واجدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في البارزين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرده، ومن كادني فكده، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك. وجد لي بجودك، واعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومنا علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه دواء، وذكره شفاء، وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء، وسلاحه البكاء. يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بي ما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Another reverb, please. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. Respected brothers, respected sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. One of the questions that has been recently raised with respect to dealing with companies that support the Zionist regime in the occupied lands of Palestine. And there's a lot of propaganda on social media in terms of posting different lists of companies that are said to be of the supporters or of the contributors to the Zionist regime in Palestine. Our marja'iyya, our scholars, our fuqaha, for the past decade or even more than a decade, 2 decades or more, have explained this issue and have issued fatwa with this respect. Now recently some of these rulings or some of these answers from the office of His Eminence Sayyid Sistani and other fuqaha have been reposted, and they require a little bit of clarification, as sometimes when we read the answers or read the ruling from the website, from those who transmit and convey these rulings, we may not take into consideration the entire elements of the ruling or the confinements and limits. His Eminence in his answer with respect to the issue of purchasing and dealing with companies that support the Zionist regime says that there is no permission to deal with Israeli products and the products of companies that are proven to have effective support for what's so-called Israel. Here we have to understand a couple of points. Point number one, there's a difference between companies that are in Israel, and these companies clearly cannot be dealt with. We can't work for them, we can't support them, we can't buy and sell and so on and so forth. Any dealing is not permitted with companies that are based in the occupied lands under the Israeli regime or under the Zionist regime. I'm very hesitant, and I mentioned that in Arabic, to call the Zionist regime by the name Israel, because in our Islamic literature, Israel is a holy name, it's a sacred name, it's a sacred figure, is the prophet and messenger of Allah, Jacob, Yaqub, ala nabina wa alihi wa alihi alafu tahiyyatu wassalam. And to really respect and honor this great prophet, Yaqub, we don't want to use his name or allow others who claim that this is the government of Israel. We don't want to endorse that and accept that, although we sometimes unknowingly, unintentionally call it Israel. But in reality, if you want to think about it and reflect, this is not Israel, this is the Zionist regime. Israel is a holy name. It's like if somebody, for example, under the banner of Islam creates, and this happened, ISIS, what did they call their government? Ad-Dawla al-Islamiyya, the Islamic State. But I can't call it the Islamic State. Why? Because that's endorsing that this is really the Islamic State. It doesn't represent the Islamic State. Yes, if Rasulullah is the head, yes, that's the Islamic State. If Ali ibn Abi Talib is the head, yes, that is the Islamic State. If our beloved awaited Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan is the head of it, yes, that is the Islamic State. But for a group of terrorists to come together and establish something and call it the Islamic State, we cannot endorse that. So that's why we refer to it as what is so-called the Islamic State. What is so-called Israel? Because we don't endorse these names from the start. We have to be very careful. Sometimes we may assume that the name is just a name. No, but the name has a huge effect, my dears. By endorsing the name, by considering that there is a strong association between the name and between the entity, then we almost give that entity a religious cover, and at the same time we disservice or do disservice to that holy figure or that holy name. We basically would disinfringe the sanctity of that name by allowing it to be associated with a group of criminals or a group of terrorist or group of Zionists. So let's call it the Zionist regime, or what is so-called Israel. Now, companies that are in that territory under the rule of the Zionists cannot be dealt with. What about companies outside of that region? Companies that could be in some of the Muslim countries, in some of the Arabic countries, in some of the Western countries, in the US. What is the ruling with respect to these companies? Sayyid clearly mentions two things. Number one, he says companies that are proven, and I want to underline that, to have effective, underline that, support for this entity, the Zionist regime. Which means that before boycotting or asking others to boycott a specific company, we have to have ilm that this company indeed supports the Zionist regime. Oftentimes people think that whatever's posted on social media is binding. Now if you choose on a personal level to boycott whatever you see on social media out of precaution in terms of these lists, that's fine. That's not a bad practice because you're trying to be on the safe side. But we can't impose that on other members of the community and accuse them of not boycotting if they don't agree with us on boycotting certain companies. Now, is social media by itself enough? Is it binding on us, what is posted on there? Unless we trust the website or the post or whoever owns the post and that they are indeed someone we trust, they have done their research and they have reached these conclusions, then okay. Otherwise, it's hard to say that everything that is listed there is accurate. So maybe we have to go out of our way if we like a specific company or we deal with it and we suspect that it may support the Zionist regime. This is where we would have to research. I mean, go on their website, do some research about that company to figure out whether they truly support or contribute to the Zionist regime or not. Because if they don't, then we don't have to boycott them and ask others to boycott them. But if they do, then this is where it becomes necessary for us to boycott them. As His Eminence says, there's no permission in dealing with these companies. Now, some of us might say, there are certain products that we need. Certain products that we need. And here I want us to differentiate between products that we really need and without them we would be in unbearable hardship or harm, and between products that we really do not need to that extent but want or have been accustomed to or used to. The products that we truly need and that if without having them we could be in unbearable hardship, for example, certain medications, for example, certain food supplements, or even to the extent of water, let's say. Right? Imagine that all the water companies in the world support the Zionist regime. We can't boycott water. That's just almost impossible, right? We don't have other means. Unless you have wells and you do your own thing, but that's not feasible for people. That's not even accessible for most people. So at that point, because this is a necessity, you're going to still purchase it despite knowing that the company does support. So if things are as important and necessary and there's no alternative or replacement, then of course at that point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want us to be in hardship. And Allah has given us permission to eat that which He has forbidden in the Holy Quran under cases of urgency. Mayta, basically the corpse that is not slaughtered according to Islamic law, khinzir, the pork, and so on and so forth, have clearly been prohibited in the Holy Quran. But Islam still says in Surah Al-Ma'idah, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. One who is desperate, one who reaches a point of urgency where they have no other option, to the necessary extent they are permitted. So here, if a person identifies that a product is needed, and they looked for an alternative, and they cannot find the alternative, but without that product, their life would be very difficult, then at that point they have an exception. They have an exception, and that is between them and Allah. Now, who identifies? The person himself, the duty bound. Who identifies whether the company is in support of the Zionist regime or not? The person himself. We cannot rely on marja'iyah, for example, the leadership in the seminaries to identify for us, because that issue is not something that they can take responsibility for in terms of searching and identifying. They leave that to the mukallaf. On the other hand, it's a way to make people's life easy. Because imagine, someone finds out through these leaders, for example, religious leaders, that indeed this is a long list of companies that do support the Zionist regime, and that person doesn't have the the level of resilience to boycott everything. In the end, we're human beings, we have our challenges, we have our weaknesses. Then that person would be subject to falling into sin due to not abiding by these recommendations. That is why it's left to the mukallaf himself. The mukallaf comes to know, the duty bound, that indeed this company supports the Zionist regime, then that is their duty between them and Allah. My personal humble recommendation to my dear brothers and sisters is, if you want to be cautious to avoid that which possibly supports the Zionist regime, that is great, but let's avoid judging others and trying to impose our own judgment and our understanding on others. And if I walk into a brother's house, for example, or sister, and for example I see a product there, I shouldn't be, judging them and saying, oh, you support the Zionist, or you're not boycotting this company, because I don't know the situation, I don't know the scenario. Perhaps they've searched and they are not content that this company does. Perhaps they don't know, and if they don't know, it's not my duty to tell them at this point. What is obligatory upon us is to inform people of ruling, not identify subject. And I've mentioned this in the past, but I'll repeat it. For example, if someone doesn't know that khamr, wine, is haram, it's my duty to tell them that wine is haram. But if someone doesn't know that this water has a drop of khamr in it, which makes it mutanajjis, if I don't offer them that water, it's not my duty to identify and say, oh, by the way, don't drink this water. I can if I want to, but it's not wajib upon me. If I saw a person walk into a restaurant, and I know this restaurant says they are halal, for example, but I know for a fact, for example, that they are not halal, and I know a Muslim brother is walking there, I don't have the responsibility to go and say, hey, stop, pause, where are you going? No, because I know they know what's halal and what's haram, and I know they have done their research, I give them the benefit of the doubt. According to them, this is halal. The fact that I know doesn't mean that I have to go now and tell everyone, hey, be careful, don't go. It's not my responsibility. Yes, in cases where I know that this person, let's say, eating from that place would cause serious harm to that person, such that, let's say, the food in that place is poisonous, then at that point, to save their life, I would come and intervene and say, you know what, be careful, this food is poisonous. So we have to keep those points in mind. To impose on others what we believe in, what we are content with, is not a very healthy and rational practice. So we have to keep that in mind. If I know for a fact a certain company does support the Zionist regime, it is my duty to boycott. But if others don't believe so or are not convinced, it is not my duty to go and provide them with proof and bombard them with different posts, and this website says this and this social media post says that. That is not my responsibility. But again, we have to not underestimate the power of boycotting, because boycotting does a lot. We may sometimes assume that what is my $2 product going to do? But if I think this way and a million other people think the same way, then that $2 becomes what? 2 million automatically. So now we said, what is the 2 million? And the 2 million can do a lot. I don't know how many missiles you can buy with it, I'm not sure, but in the end it does so much. So we cannot underestimate the power of boycotting, and we also cannot underestimate the power of self-sufficiency. Some of the countries that have been able to sustain themselves by having what we call iktifa dhati, or the self-sufficiency. What I mean by self-sufficiency is that they don't rely on products from outside. They make their own products. And unfortunately, in our Islamic world, that's not a culture yet. We still rely on the products that are being imported from other countries. And it makes us in need, and it makes us captivated. Inshallah, there will come a point where we as Muslims, even in our own towns, we will reach a point where we would have, factories that manufacture the products that we need, and that way we don't have to. For example, if we manufacture certain products and we know that these products are also manufactured elsewhere, and in that elsewhere they support the Zionists, then we are safe because this is our factory and we know that our factory does not support. So that gives us a peace of mind. Just like how the halal industry became something, in the 70s, 60s, there was no halal industry in the US. But because of the demand and the need, there's a lot of people that came together and put different poultries, different, companies that, export or that produce halal meat and so on and so forth. Likewise, we may reach that point in the future where we would have our own farms that produce our produce, that we would have our own companies that even produce whatever that is part of daily necessities, even water, milk, that way we don't have to rely, even coffee, for example. And that is something that we should have the ambition and the aspiration to do in the near future, so that we always remain needless of others. There's a beautiful maxim I quoted in Arabic, attributed to the Commander of the Faithful, in which he says, "Staghni amman shi'ta takun amira." Be needless of whomever you wish to be needless of, ye shall be their commander. You won't need them, they will need you. You'll have the upper hand. وَاحْتَجْ إِلَى مَنْ شِئْتَ تَكُنْ أَسِيرًا. Be in need of whoever you wish, you'll be their captive. What captivates us, my dears, is that we are in need of that other party, and now when that other party decides to support this cause or that cause, we find ourselves, empty-handed, limited. What do we do? But we've been relying on this. Same thing that we have reached in the recent years with respect to public schools. We saw that public schools are no longer safer for our children, but we haven't prepared for that stage. What do we do now? Well, what do? I have not many options, but what can I do? Now I'm losing my children because I feel kind of pressured to send them to school, and I don't have an alternative, so I send them to public school. But had we thought about this ahead of time and went ahead of the game and established as many private schools as we can, then at that point we will be what? Needless of, not be in need of public schools, for example, not be in need of these companies that support the Zionist regime. So that self-sufficiency is a must for any successful community. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant all of us the tawfiq and our future generations to reach that point of awareness and to materialize that and practice that in their lives, such that we will see the Muslim communities, be it in the East or in the West, not in need of any other entity, and they have sustained themselves by themselves, inshaAllah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Respected sisters, if you have a question, you can proceed, and then we'll come to the brothers as well. Sister Maryam, go ahead.
So basically,
yeah, go ahead.
What if somebody buys you something?
Yes, continue. Go ahead. No problem. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. What if somebody buys something from like a company that supports the
Zionists? Uh-huh.
Yeah. What if they buy you something and then they're like, oh, why don't you just eat it? Like, why don't you just like take it? Like,
so the problem is not with eating or taking. The problem is actually buying. For example, if somebody comes and gives me free products of that company, that doesn't mean that it's not permissible for me to even use that product. I can still use the product. I can't support that product, promoting it, telling people to buy it, or even going and buying it. But if somebody comes and says, here you go, you can have this, I haven't paid anything for it, therefore it's not supporting them if I end up consuming that water. But if I promote that water to others and say, look, I'm consuming it, it's good, you should buy it, that would be a form of support as well. Ahsanti. Any other questions from the gent side? Brother Sayyid Jawad. The comment.
Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid.
Assalamu rahmatullah.
So quick question on the research aspect of this is, how much research do we have to do to find, like if there's a common product that I buy all the time, should I double check to say, oh, does that company support Zionists before I go and continue buying it?
Very good question. Technically speaking, from a fiqh standpoint, do you have to search? If you're unsure, the default is it's halal. Again, Islam wants our life to be simple and easy. If before I buy anything I go make a research, that's going to be difficult. Islam says, look, if you're unsure, the default is you can take it. But once you come to know, or you have a very high suspicion, then you should go and double check before you are purchasing the product. But if it's like, well, maybe and maybe, I don't have to. But if I want to go out of my way ethically to make sure that I am not, in support of the Zionist regime, then I can do so. But is it wajib? It's not wajib because I don't know. كل شيء لك حلال حتى تعلم. Everything is lawful for you until you know. That's a rule that our beloved Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam has established for us in the very famous narration. Yes, Brother Sayyid.
So the question, so if it's made in Israel, it's not allowed. If it supports Israel, it's not allowed. But if we need it, it's okay then, right?
If we need it and there's no alternative. Now, number one, we need it. Number two, there's no alternative. And when I say need, I don't mean need it as in I'm used to having it. That's not need. Right. Someone could tell me, well, I need this coffee. No, you don't need this coffee. There's many other coffees that you can get. And even if you can't find coffee, you'll find go for chai. It may give you caffeine. But you really don't need it. You want it. So the need has to be established. Dire necessity, we call it. Darura. Dire necessity. If it's dire necessity, then that would be your take, your responsibility as a mukallaf to say, I'm willing to risk this because, support this entity, but I have no other option. But these, inshallah, should be very rare situations.
So they also, like in Israel, they do have one of the, largest medications and stuff like that. So, and there is an alternative to it, but they have minor side effects where they're not as good as the ones that they're offering.
Yeah, that doesn't justify. Why? Because having that minor side effect does not create urgency, does not create haraj or darar, right?
Yes.
There's, if I'm used to, for example, a specific medicine, and now I have to switch to another medicine, another brand, it may have side effects. It may be challenging, no, maybe a little bit more expensive than the one I used to buy, and it may kind of put a little bit pressure on me financially, but all that stuff is still not at the level of urgency or the level of unbearable hardship or darar, right? It's all bearable, and as long as it's bearable, then the exception doesn't apply.
Understood. Okay.
Ahsantum. Any other questions? Sisters, yes, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, Mariam, go ahead.
So what if there's like a big company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's smaller companies under that big company. What if that big company supports the Zionists, but the smaller ones, like, you're not sure of?
Okay. Now, these small companies, you're probably referring to a franchise. You're referring to franchise?
Yeah.
Because if you're part of a franchise, I'm not sure how the logistics are, but if you have to contribute a percentage and you sign the agreement with them, then you're also, that company, even if it's a small company, it's also in support. But if they are not obliged, again, I don't know the legalities here, if they're not obliged to contribute, let's say we have a big company, such as McDonald's, for example, and let's say McDonald's supports. I'm not sure, but let's say it does.
They do.
If they do, okay. So if they do, and there's a branch here, is that branch obliged or obligated to give a portion of its percentage because of the franchise, because of the name? If that is the case, then the same ruling applies. But if I know for sure that no, this is a separate entity, meaning that they don't support because they have the option not to support, which I doubt that that's the case. Usually when you buy the name, you kind of have to follow because they take a percentage of you anyways from the profits, and there has to be some type of stipulation somewhere. And at that point, the same rule applies. But if you come to find that no, this is absolutely separate, they don't support, they have nothing to do with it, then of course there would be no problem at that point.
So, Colgate, the toothpaste brand,
Mm-hmm.
they support the Zionists, if they make like a similar thing, but it's in like a different, like a whole different company, like a whole different thing, and it's like the same people, but they support the same thing, but you don't know, is that...
It's not about the people or the name of the product as much as it is about you knowing that this product supports the owner of this product, the seller supports the Zionist regime. Again, if you don't know, you don't have to research. Researching is something that you can choose to do. But if you don't want to do it and you say, you know what, I am not sure, so I'll rely on the default that it is permissible, then you don't have to research. Ahsantum. Yes, Sister Sayyida, go ahead.
I don't know if you mentioned this or not, but you said that if you see something or you hear somebody else tell you something about a company that supports, are you obligated to verify?
Ahsanti. You're not obligated to verify. Why? Because the fact that someone makes a statement doesn't necessarily give you itmi'nan. Unless you know that person did the research and you're almost content that what they're saying is true, then it's binding. But it's not binding just because someone raises that concern that, oh, this company does. Unless it creates a very high likeliness in your mind, you know what, this person is probably 90% right, then it would be important to research before you proceed. But if it still remains 50-50, I don't think they're 100% sure, then at that point, you can still use the default. Yes, Sister Maya.
So Sayyid, I remember in the early stages when I was looking into the boycott, the BDS list, they have an actual section for technology. And under that section they wrote, you can boycott as much as you want, but if you don't boycott the technology aspect, which is their most profitable aspect, you're really not doing much. So especially when you mention, dharura and things that are a necessity, brands like Apple, Samsung, brands we use.
Have they been proven to?
They're on the official list.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So
that means if I know, say, let's go with the fact that I know and you know for sure that they do, Apple is not a darura, right? Because there are other smartphones. Well, no, the other smartphones are not very cool. They're not very, fast. They're not as good. But it's not a darura. Darura is to have the means of communication, but maybe we have to go back to the very generic brands, the cheaper brands. Now, the fact that you already own one doesn't mean that you have to give it away, because again, you're not paying for it, you already paid for it. But going forward, knowing that this phone company does indeed support, I can't buy their product. So for the next, iPhone 16 comes out and I wish to upgrade and I know they still support, then I can't go for iPhone 16. I have to be careful. Why? Because that's support. Same thing goes with Samsung, if it's proven, But if it's just they say, or the website is not very sure, or there's a possibility there is a mistake, then of course that doesn't put an obligation on someone. Ahsantum, thank you. But again, we have to keep in mind, darura does not mean something I am used to, something I have to have. We have to differentiate between the quality of that thing and the thing itself. I need a phone, okay, I need a phone. But do I have to have this quality? Is that a darura? No. It's like a car. Is a Lamborghini daruri for me? No, but I need a car. It could be any drivable car that goes from A to B. Now, I choose to have a nicer car, a higher quality. That's a choice, but it's not a darura. Santu. Yes, Brother Meeth, I'm sorry. I'll come back to you, Miriam.
Sayyid, so the idea of product boycott has become a fiqh ruling. If we take it from a slightly different angle of at the level of country support and citizenship, what is the criteria for that becoming a fiqh ruling? So, for example, for many who are born here, U.S. citizenship is not a choice, right? And if we know that the U.S. supports the Zionist regime openly, including sending aid to Muslim countries as well, it's a mixed bag. But we know that there is support for the Zionist regime. What is our responsibility, or what's the criteria for it becoming a fiqh issue versus just a moral conversation of, okay, let's protest, let's do this to voice our opinion with government, especially for those who do have a choice to have a citizenship of another country. At what point does it become a fiqh rule to say, no, if you do have a choice to not have citizenship of a country that openly supports the Zionist regime versus a country that does not openly support it?
Having the citizenship per se is not direct support, right? For example,
but Sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah. For example, in Iraq, under the reign and regime of the tyrant Saddam Hussein, he committed different crimes against other countries, including the neighbor Iran, right? And Kuwait. Does that mean that a person who is a citizen of Iraq or lives there and lives in the Islamic seminary, studies in Islam, they have to either leave that place or give up that citizen if they have other options, or not even get the citizenship because of that? No. Why? Because citizenship, having it or not having it, does not give the support to that entity, and therefore their actions would be supported by my citizenship, for instance. If it has no difference, then we can't say it becomes a fiqhi issue or a haram issue. Still, our fuqaha have not yet spoken on this issue specifically. What they have said is, living in a place or in a country, irrespective of their citizen or not, if it results in the weakening of your faith and that of your family, and you have an alternative, then it becomes necessary to leave that place.
Sure. So just one follow-up on that.
Sure.
So when we give our tax dollars, and we know that the tax dollars go
Sure.
to aid for the Zionist regime, isn't that considered direct or indirect support?
So there's a difference between giving and having it taken from us. Giving is different than having it. We don't give. Do you ever choose to contribute to taxes? Like, oh yeah, I wake up in the morning, I want to contribute to the government. I'll send you guys some taxes, like you would do with the Jama'ah or with our Islamic centers, right? No, they force. So your paycheck doesn't come to you unless they deduct it. So if you have option not to, which I don't think you have the option to say, you know what, I want to work, but I don't want to pay the taxes. I don't think that's an option, legally speaking, right? You can't just work and say, I don't want to pay taxes. And they say, yeah, it's up to you. You know, if you do, may Allah bless you, inshallah. If you don't, it's okay. I don't think that's the case. There's going to be a problem if you don't pay the taxes. So that the money's being taken from you, and you're not given the option of how it is used. Now, you're not sure that your tax dollar is exactly going directly there, because we're talking about 300 million Americans, right? And we're not saying that all their taxes is going there. There's a percentage that is going there. How much of that percentage really would come down to your dollar or your tax dollar? Probably close to nothing if it's not very little amount. So in the end, you don't have the confidence and the itmi'nan that there is a portion of your taxes that is actually contributing to the money that they sent to the Zionist regime. Let alone, you have no control over how they're using it, because they're telling you, we're taking your taxes, we're doing your schools for you, we're doing your infrastructure for you, we're doing so much things for you, but part of it we are sending there. So that control we don't have. That's why it comes down to electing representatives that make that call, right? Or Congress, presidential elections. That's where it makes a difference. That's why you hear me in the past say that if I know both representatives or both congressmen or women and both presidents support the regime, then I can't vote for any of them. Because now voting is like me adding to it by bringing them into power and allowing them to legislate giving these taxes to the Zionist regime. Being a citizen doesn't mean I have to vote. So they give you the option to vote or not vote, but they don't give you the option to pay taxes or not pay taxes. Morally speaking, if you have a good alternative to have a peace of mind elsewhere, no support, no taxes being sent to that Zionist regime, morally speaking, that would be the best option, is that relocation and that change. But fiqh-wise, we don't have yet enough data or information that our fuqaha based on can issue a clear ruling that you must leave and you must not pay the taxes and so on and so forth. Assalamu alaikum. Yes, Brother Kamil.
So I had two quick questions. One, and sorry if I missed this, did we define what support is? Does it have to be monetary or it can be otherwise?
So support so far is monetary, because if it comes down to just verbal support, or this company is known to support, just they vocally say we are in support of this regime, then that would put us under a lot of hardship, right? Because we know some of the Islamic countries have created what we call normalization with the Zionist regime. So that means all the Muslims in that region would be, their religiosity would be at jeopardy. So really it's hard to say that just because they have a voice or they support not financially, then we have to boycott them. But sometimes that indirectly becomes a support. How? If that person who's voicing that support and encouraging, not monetarily, but encouraging the existence of the Zionist regime, if me purchasing from that company makes that company grow, and their voice would grow and reach more and they get more support, then that indirectly means that I am contributing to the support of the Zionists. But technically, if we want to go with the minimum fiqh aspect of it, if there's no monetary support, we have no proof that we still have to boycott that company.
So thank you, Sayyid. And one
second
other
question, yeah.
quick question was so when it comes to, for example, if you take a company like Target, or if you take an iPhone, right? So if we find out that Target, 70% of their goods that they sell, they're sourcing from Israel, should we be boycotting the company? So even though we could go to Target and buy a product that's not from Israel, a lot of the products they do buy, and same with an iPhone where there could be 100 components in here,
Sure.
and one of those components comes from Israel.
But the law of probability, and which I'm sure you're all familiar with in math, when you say 70% of the products, that means there's a high chance that any product you place your hand on is going to be from Israel. And there's a good chance. It's not like, the chances that this is an Israeli product are little, because you're saying 70%. So that means there's a high chance.
Just so everyone knows, I made that up, so you don't have to boycott.
Sure, yeah. Ahsan, thank you, Kamil, because I got scared for a little bit. Anyhow, but the idea is this. If I know, and there's a good chance like this, then of course I have to be very careful and have to search before I buy the product, let alone even boycott the whole company, because if 70%, that means is a good level of percentage that's being in support of the Zionist regime coming out of that company. So that has to be avoided, at least based on precautionary measures at that point. But if I don't know and I don't research, then I can be on the default side of things and just assume that it's halal at that point. Yes, Maryam, sorry. Yes.
Basically, if this one car company is supporting the Zionists, but you have like a monthly payment with it, do you still have to do that monthly payment?
Good question. So here's the thing, Sister Maryam. Let me explain something with cars and correct me if I'm wrong. Usually the car company itself doesn't give you the loan. The loan comes from another bank.
No, like
the company itself doesn't tell you, here's the car and you pay to us. No, they get you a loan from a bank, and now you have a relationship with that bank. You're paying the payments to the bank, and the car company has already received all of its money. So really you're making the payments to the bank and not to the car company, and at that point it would not be considered that you're paying to that company. Kamil, if you want to.
Most car companies now have their own finance division.
Okay.
Part of the same company.
So they have their own bank, in other words. Okay. So Brother Kam is saying most car companies do have that option now. So if you know that the car company gave you the loan from their own money, from their own finance department or financing, and you know that company supports, then of course by making payments, that payment is percentage of it is going to support. And at that point, if you can get out of that without serious repercussions or serious penalties, then you should do so. Otherwise, you remain doing it out of being in hardship if you do so. Like if you were to just go, they would, for example, make you pay a lot of money or ruin your credit or do something that is harmful, then at that point you would have an excuse at least.
Also, another question, how long do we have to boycott these companies for?
As long as they continue to support the Zionist regime, as long as there's a Zionist regime. But if there's no Zionist regime, alhamdulillah, it's all over, and these companies don't have a way of supporting it because it's over, or they stop supporting it because of how much pressure we have put on them, then at that point we don't boycott them. Boycotting, again, is contingent upon the continuous support. When there's no continuous support, there's no need to boycott.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Sister Maryam. Thank you. Yes, Sayyidina.
So now I had a question. So, we live in the West, and what about working for one of these companies?
So we said dealing includes not just buying and selling, but also working. So if I work for a company and I know that company contributes part of its assets or profits or whatever to the Zionist, then I can't work for that company, because by working for that company, I am continuously sustaining it, because the company, how is it sustained? Through the employees. Without the employees, it can't continue to generate revenue. Otherwise, why would they need you as an employee and pay you money? Because through you, they are generating revenue. So your presence in that company is a form of support to that company and the continuation of that company, and therefore, you would be that would be considered a form of support. Again, if you know for a fact that this company does support financially, monetary, the Zionist regime.
So then my other question is that, since we live in the West, it's so tough. It's getting really tough for us to work for these companies because they either support Israel or they support LGBTQ, or the job has some type of interest involved, or they have some alcohol involved, or maybe we have to sell it in our shops, or it's just it's really easy to fall into any of these categories.
That's why we have a hadith. We have a hadith that speaks to this. Actually, some of the prophecies by the Holy Prophet or the Al Bayt alayhim salam, that towards the end of time or later in time, being able to secure a lawful dirhamul halal, right? Dirhamu min halal. Being able to secure a lawful dirham is one of the hardest things that would be for the people. What do you think it means when they say you hold on to your religion like you're holding on a fire or coal in your hand? That's what they mean. That really things are going to be challenging. Our comfort zone will no longer work. The problem is we say, you know what, but it's not convenient for me. If I don't sell this, like I've seen people that say, if I don't sell this in my company or my store, I won't get as much profit. So we're still aiming at as much, where we're not looking even for the minimum to get by. So really this has to mean changing our lifestyle. This has to mean that going for necessities as opposed to the luxuries, so that we can ensure that we are not doing haram. In other words, well, this job pays good, but that doesn't mean I have to have this job if I know that there is haram involved in it. Well, the other job doesn't pay much and my life is going to be a little bit tough. I won't have as much access to the luxuries of life that others have. Well, that's the point of having that coal in your hand, is you're going to be facing hardship and difficulties. That is really what it comes down to, is that it's not always convenient for us to be religious. Being religious sometimes is okay and convenient, but sometimes it's hard. That is why Hussein alayhi salam, Imam al-Hussein, on his way to Karbala, or one of his sermons, he says, "An-nasu abidu dunya." People are enslaved to dunya. وَالدِّينُ لَعَقٌ عَلَى أَلْسِنَتِهِم. Right? The religion is just something that they chew, something they just talk about. يَحُوطُونَهُ مَا دَرَّتْ مَعَائِشُهُم. As long as they're receiving their paychecks and things are going well for them, then they're protecting it, then they're holding on to it. فَإِذَا مُحُّصُوا بِالْبَلَاءِ. As soon as they are tested, قَلَّ الدَّيَانُونَ. Those who are religious become scarce, they become few. Why? Because some people don't want to give up that comfort zone. Some people don't want to give up that convenience and that nice and luxurious lifestyle for the sake of preserving their religion. This is why the choice, this choice between leaving and staying, between giving up this for the sake of religion, shows the real religiosity of the person. Religion is not shown just by me praying, because they don't charge me to pray. They don't fire me from work for praying, so I'll pray. There's not much to it, just get up and pray. But when it comes down to that, if we find out you pray, we will fire you from your job, and I give up my job for the sake of my salah and find other lawful means of sustenance, this shows that I'm really committed to my religion, and it's not about, for the sake of, I allow convenience and comfort to be preferred over my religiosity in relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam, Hajjina wa Zahra, hayakum Allah.
So when it comes to social media, there's a lot nowadays of tweets, posts, YouTubes that some of them support people of Gaza, some of them support Israel, and a lot of false information. Is there any obligation or duty, wajib, on Muslims to, to react to these, maybe like it or discredit something?
Ahsant, very good. Quran gives us a clear criteria. وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. Do not follow, do not pursue that which you have no knowledge of. If I am content that this video truly supports the madlumeen, the oppressed, again, is it wajib to give it a like? I don't want to say wajib per se, but if it helps their case, if me giving a like and him and her giving a like, that would make it even reach a far reach, then that would be at least ethically wajib, if not religiously. But if I am unsure that this does service, or I am unsure that the information is accurate, right? For example, there's a video that has fake stuff attributed to this regime or to that entity, and I want to support it just for the sake of supporting that cause, even though I know or I'm not sure about the credibility of the information, then no. Because in Islam, لا يطاع الله من حيث يعصى. We cannot obey Allah through means of disobedience. We have to be very careful. We cannot let our emotions drive our actions and how we support and how we don't support. So we have to take the moderate approach. I know this is good, it's going to serve the cause, I support it. I am skeptical about another video, I won't support it. I'll give you an example. Recently, one of our respected sisters in other states sent me a video. The video had words from a speech by one of the ulama, Shia ulama in Lebanon, and she said, can I post this? Now here's the issue with that video. The person there was a singer who's not wearing hijab, right, mutabarrija, and that singer was singing the words of that speech in support of Palestine, and her way of singing was suitable with the alhan that are muharram. So now you have a lahan that is haram, you have a lady that is in her full tabarruj, right? But the words are in support of Palestine. There is this clerk's imama in the background. Now this is mixing between haqq and batil here, right? Mixing between haqq and batil. Now she says, yeah, but this supports the case. I said I wouldn't promote that video. Why? Because we can't just look at one aspect of the video, right? Imagine, for example, one of the LGBTQ supporters who's wearing the flag and everything, and they're saying, I am with Gaza and I denounce the crimes. Oh, mashallah, good video, let's promote it. But you're indirectly promoting that person's lifestyle, right? With it comes that. So we have to make sure that we don't have batil with haqq, as we say. We can't, like if you have a pure bottle of water and you want to offer it to your friend, but somehow a drop of blood fell in it, you say, well, it's only a drop of blood, it's still going to quench their thirst. It won't work because now it's mutanajjis. So that content, when it's mutanajjis content by things that are haram or things that are not right, I can't support that content. Again, I don't want to be a waswasi and have like this very particular and OCD about it, and no, this may have that. But at the same time, we don't want to just support anything that we see in front of us unless we are comfortable that it does not encompass any haram or anything that is batil.
Then how about this hadith, like, I'm not sure if it is accurate or not. الساكت عن الحق هو شيطان أسود.
أخرس. الساكت عن الحق. الساكت عن الحق, number one, a person who knows there's haqq, that's number one, is able to speak to support that haqq, but chooses not to. This is the shaitan al-akhras. هذا إذا صح الحديث, that's a different story. But let's say the content seems okay. The sanad, I can't speak for that, but the content seems okay. Yani it's in line with our Islamic values. When you have haqq, you need to do nusra to it, When there's batil, you need to stand against it. But does it mean that every time there's something that is supposed to be haqq, and I'm not sure it's haqq, because there's an aspect of haqq that is possibly in it, I have to support it? No, not necessarily. Sometimes someone can raise the banner of haqq, but they are batil. Al-Abbasids, the Abbasiyin, they raised a very sacred banner. They said, Ya li tharat al-Husayn, للرضا من آل Muhammad. We were calling for the one who is from Al Muhammad to take on. So if I was during that time, I could have said, we all need to support the Abbasids, not knowing that they will take Imam Musa al-Kadhim, put him in jail, and then poison him and kill him. Then I would say, oh, I regret supporting them. Well, I thought because they said Ya li Tharat al-Hussein, we have to be careful. And I say this sometimes, and it's sensitive in a way. Sometimes even some of our Shia communities or Shia entities, I'm not talking about Sunni, Shia entities that may have these shi'arat or slogans, but I would be skeptical about some of these slogans. Just because they are Shia, just because the slogan speaks to what I believe in, doesn't necessarily mean that this entity or that group is truly haqq, and I can easily say, Ya Allah, I am with that. We have to be very cautious because the time that we're in, haqq and batil are mixed. It's not easy to separate between the two. That's why al-ihtiyat sabilun najat. Precaution is the way of salvation. أحسنتم كثيرا والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. زيارة إن شاء الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام على الحسن المجتبى وعلى الحسين الشهيد بكربلاء، السلام على علي السجاد ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد الجواد وعلي الهادي والحسن العسكري والحجة الخلف القائم المهدي. السلام عليكم سادتي جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.